How often do you feel unheard? Like, no matter how carefully you explain yourself, your words just don't land the same way as someone else's. That experience isn't just personal, it's structural. And that's what muted group theory is all about. How language itself can silence. Welcome back to Communication Campus. I'm your host, Dr. Malynnda Stewart. In today's episode, we are exploring muted group theory, a theory that examines how power and language interact and how dominant groups shape the way we communicate, often muting those without social privilege. Now, muted group originated in anthropology and feminist scholarship. And it was first observed that women in certain African societies were underrepresented in recorded speech and in public discourse, not because they were silenced, but because the language system wasn't built for their experiences. And then they later applied this to Western culture, arguing that language is a man-made construction developed primarily through male experiences and therefore with male priorities. Now, the theorists behind this say that because men historically held so much social power, they shaped language. And that means that women and other marginalized groups often struggle to fully express their realities using those same linguistic tools. So, muted group theory identifies several ways that this muting can happen. First, we have language bias, terms that reflect male experiences and that are considered neutral. For example, man is the default for all humanity, mankind, man made, so on and so forth. Even using the word guys. Hey guys, how's it going? We're referring to men, even though it is considered neutral. Then we have gatekeeping, where dominant groups control media, academia, and institutions that decide what communication is or is not appropriate. Then we have translation work. Muted groups often have to translate their experiences into the dominant group's language in order to be understood. For example, women describing workplace sexism may feel pressured to use polite or professional language to make their experiences feel credible. A form of translation that dilutes the emotion and truth. Now, I want us to remember that muted group theory isn't just about silence, it's about resistance. Muted groups develop strategies to make their voices heard, creating alternative channels like zines, and you youngins can tell me if I'm saying that wrong, blogs, social media communities, and all of these are going to bypass traditional media filters. Reclaiming language is another one, challenging sexist or exclusionary terms and inviting new ones, like chairperson or Ms. And narrative and storytelling is our last one. We're going to use personal stories and collective testimony to validate lived experiences. Now, by creating and sharing language that reflects this truth, muted groups don't just find their voices, they reshape culture itself. Now, while MGT, muted group theory, began as a feminist theory, it applies to many contexts. Any marginalized group by class, race, sexuality, disability, or culture can experience muting when dominant communication norms fail to recognize their perspectives. So, from corporate boardrooms to media representation, even academic language to digital spaces, muted group theory challenges us to ask, whose language is this? And who does it actually serve? Okay, to sum it all up, muted group theory reveals that language and power are inseparable. Those with privilege define what counts as credible communication. But muted groups resist by redefining the conversation themselves. Thanks for joining me in this episode. In our next session, we'll explore yet another theory that's going to challenge power and identity in the way that we speak, listen, and connect. Until then, remember, finding your voice isn't about speaking louder. It's about challenging the system so everyone